I'm Bess Miller, and this is my lesson video. I grew up in Michigan, and since the Playhouse is in Ohio, I figured I would talk about the time our two states went to war. This was in 1835 to 36, so well before the Civil War. We're trendsetters! And it was known as the Toledo War, or the Michigan-Ohio War, and it was fought, unsurprisingly, over ownership of the city of Toledo and this tract of land around it, which was known as the Toledo Strip. Now, at the time, Ohio was already a state, and a very powerful swing state at that, and Michigan was still just a measly territory. But Michigan was petitioning to become a state, and when they did, mighty Ohio stepped in and blocked them. And this is because Michigan and Ohio were in the middle of this very passive-aggressive standoff over this tract of land, the Toledo Strip, which was either the southernmost border of Michigan or the northernmost border of Ohio, depending on which side you talked to. Technically, Michigan is in the right. And I'm not just saying that because I'm from Michigan. I'm saying that because Ohio was basing its claims on a very faulty old map from the 1780s. When the United States government first acquired the land that was to become Michigan and Ohio, the first map it had commissioned of that area was just not particularly accurate. The Michigan Peninsula is drawn much smaller than it actually is, and it looks like this kind of weird shriveled monkey's paw. Lake Michigan is also much smaller than it is, and crucially, much shorter than it is. The map didn't accurately depict how far south Lake Michigan stretches, which became important because when the government granted Michigan and Ohio tracts of land, what it said was Ohio gets all the new land south of the bottom tip of Lake Michigan, and Michigan gets all the new land north of the bottom tip of Lake Michigan. So then Ohio, cleverly, starts pointing to this faulty old map and saying, look how short Lake Michigan is. It doesn't stretch anywhere near Toledo. We totally get Toledo. We get the Toledo Strip. They even wrote it into their constitution that even if somebody was to come down and notice that the lake actually stretched as far as Toledo, it didn't on this map, so Ohio still totally gets it because. But Michigan was able to point to the actual lake and say, look how far the lake actually stretches. It totally reaches as far south as Toledo. We get the Toledo Strip. And the United States government just kind of stayed out of it because Michigan was kind of right, but not very powerful, and Ohio was kind of wrong, but super powerful. And for about 20 years, the federal government ignores the problem, and Michigan and Ohio both just continue to claim the Toledo Strip and to slowly move their governmental infrastructures into the Strip and tell the citizens there, you're our citizens now, you better start following our laws, and woe betide you if we catch you following the other guy's laws. So it must have been a miserable time to be a citizen of the Toledo Strip. And unsurprisingly, after about 20 years of this, by 1835, tempers have just reached a boiling point, and it erupts into actual war. Each side musters a militia of about 1,000 men, complete with actual generals, and marches them on the Toledo Strip. And then they just kind of spend a year raiding each other's camps, shouting insults back and forth, and occasionally occupying the city of Toledo. It's almost entirely a bloodless war. No one dies in this war. The only reason it's not a bloodless war is because of two of my favorite characters in the entire conflict. An Ohio gentleman named Mr. Two Stickney, T-W-O, stabbed a Michigan deputy who was attempting to arrest Two's older brother, One. So yeah, their names were One and Two. Their parents were either very original or very unoriginal. Anyway, the conflict lasts for about a year, and then President Andrew Jackson steps in and tells Michigan, you gotta give this up or I'm never gonna grant you statehood, because Andrew Jackson needed swing state Ohio's vote in the upcoming election. So after a lot of grumbling, Michigan decides, yeah, we'd rather be a state than own Toledo, and they cede the Toledo Strip to Ohio, and in compensation, they are given the UP, which at the time was seen as a major, embarrassing defeat for Michigan. But then a few years later, Michigan discovered a lot of valuable deposits of ore up there and started a very profitable mining industry. And now Michigan is able to claim the Toledo War as a victory. Go Blue! And our states have a much more peaceful relationship these days, except on Ohio State and Michigan Wolverines game days when it can feel like we're still at war. In fact, the term Wolverine seems to come from this conflict. Many historians think that the first time Michiganders were ever actually referred to as Wolverines was in Ohio anti-Michigan propaganda during the Toledo War, because Wolverines are such vicious, rapacious, ravenous creatures. They started calling Michiganders this as an insult. So that is the origin of the name Michigan Wolverines. Thanks, Ohio. Thank you.